Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here in Denver, Colorado with my good friend and partner, Wes Brown in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Hey, Todd. How you doing, buddy? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, brother. We have a great episode for you this week with artist Collin Parson. Collin is an amazing artist that does mind-blowing sculpture and installation involving the control of light and color to create vivid geometric light and space works. In addition to being an artist, Collin is also the director of galleries and curator for the Arvada Center in Arvada, Colorado. Recognized and awarded by Westward Magazine as one of 100 Colorado creatives, Collin in the past year completed a public art project for the City of Lakewood to celebrate Lakewood's 50th anniversary. It's a large-scale installation of reflective metal sculptures in Addenbrook Park entitled Echoes and Reflections. Collin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate your time and your interest.
Yeah, this is great.
We just appreciate the fact that you're willing to spend a little time with us this evening, and I'm excited to talk about all your work. So, you were born and raised here in Denver?
Yeah, actually North Denver. Yep,
North Denver. Okay.
You guys said you interviewed Jerry La Cruz, right?
Yeah.
And I listened to part of that podcast, and I think he mentioned North Denver. You know, us from here, we don't call it the Highlands or Low High or Rhino. We call it just North Denver.
Yeah. All those other things, that's like hipster speak, right?
Yeah. It's like, it's where it kind of shows your roots a little bit. You're like, oh, North Side.
Whereabouts?
I actually, close to just north of Mile High Stadium. I think they call it Jefferson Park now. So it was like 26th and Federal, basically. So
Okay.
right across from North High School. And I was there until, I don't know, young kid. And then it was a pretty rough neighborhood. And my parents like, we got to get out of here. You know, cars getting broken into, you know, houses, just not a place to raise a family if you could help try to prevent it. So they moved west to Lakewood, right next to Crown Hill. So,
okay.
So I went to Wheat Ridge High School, and that's kind of where, you know, my parents currently live in Lakewood, and that's still home to me. And, you know, I moved, actually, it's pretty funny. I grew up on 25th and Brentwood, and I just moved to a house on 1st and Brentwood. So I'm still on Brentwood, just a little farther south.
Right on. We're like neighbors. We were kind of talking about that via email.
Yeah. And that's that public art piece you mentioned, you know, sitting on a lot of art committees. I know one thing they always want is if they can have local artists. So I pushed, you know, my hometown of Lakewood, Colorado, very hard for that sculpture. And I think that, and hopefully the concept is the reason they chose it. So
it's a really cool project. And it was funny because, you know, I've been over there numerous times and I never put two and two together. So it's cool to meet the person that created that over there.
Yeah, it's about a year old now. So
you grew up in an artistic family. Your dad is Charles Parson, and he's a pretty well-known artist here in Colorado and abroad.
Yeah, I would say, again, back to Jerry, I consider my dad, Jerry La Cruz, kind of one of the, not founders, but just, I mean, he's been here since the 70s, developing the arts community and the art scene. So he went to Cranbrook Academy for the Arts. That's where he got his MFA in sculpture. It's a really well respected art school outside of Detroit. And then Kansas City Art Institute is where he got his BFA. This was in the late 60s, early 70s. But then he came out here and fell in love with the Eastern Plains, as he said, and the horizon and landscape. And my mom was from here. She was raised in Golden on top of Lookout Mountain, actually. But she was really into modern dance, and she was part of a dance company called the Changing Scene Theater. It was run by Al Brooks and Maxine Munt. It's right on 15th and Champa is where the building is. The Bovine Metropolis Theater is there currently.
Okay.
But it was a really funky place. Imagine in the 80s, early 90s. That's kind of where I grew up as a kid with my siblings. But you don't enter, the first floor of 15th was a porn shop. The second floor was this kind of funky alternative theater that also had a little lobby that my dad curated a lot of art shows in. And then on the third floor was their like Manhattan style apartment and a dance studio. And so that's where my parents met. My dad was a set designer and curator at this funky gallery. And my mom was a dancer. And the story is my dad brought a date to see my mom dancing and kept on whispering to his date, like, isn't she great? Isn't she beautiful? And I guess, that's not a good way. I don't think that well. But that's a kind of where my parents, so a modern dancer as a mom and a sculptor as a dad, and a lot of kind of avant-garde performances that I went to as a kid. And, so like kind of the culture and art was just ingrained in me as a little boy. I mean, I remember going to art shows since I probably could walk, always in art openings and funky performances. I remember, modern dancers in the 70s not wearing any clothes, weird music, and it was kind of, quote, normal to me. I was like, all right. But and then my parents had I have an older sister who was a theater major. She's an educator now, but a performance and actress. And then I have a younger brother who's living in Durango right now. Love Durango, by the way. And but he's a musician and dabbling in visual arts himself. So we're definitely like an arts family, and we can't get away from it.
Just part of your DNA, right?
Yeah. Well, I have a young boy, and I'm not pushing art, but I think, because my wife, actually really close to you, is Belmar Academy for the Arts, School for the Arts. And my wife's like, maybe we should take Charlie there. And I was like, he'll be surrounded by the arts, he'll get to choose one way or another. I mean, we'll see, but I definitely don't want to push him, but he's already loves music, like good music, Willie Nelson, Peter Tosh, and Flaming Lips, and just like he knows these Beatles. He just knows these bands at 3 years old already. It's awesome.
That is awesome, man. Good for you.
So I don't have to listen.
That's a sign of a good parent right there.
I don't have to.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't have to listen to all that bad. Excuse me, but that the kid music that probably drives parents insane. I would say, why just introduce them to the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's, and then the kids will never know, and you get to listen to good music, and it's a win-win.
It is a win-win. And
my advice to everyone.
You can't go wrong with the Beatles,
No.
So that must have been really inspiring to be around all that all the time. Your dad's friends, your dad, watching him create. Were you creating from an early age as well, or is that something that kind of happened a little later on?
That's a good question. Well, so my dad, he's an artist, but you have to make money. So he was a muralist at the Museum of Nature and Science, and he did a lot of murals at there was an awesome amusement park at Cinderella City called Fantastic Nathan's, way back. Awesome place. But so I grew up as a kid, not only in these art shows at night and then these theater performances, but then either with my dad at museums and amusement parks. I mean, imagine you show up to your dad at work and then he's like, okay, meet back here for lunch. And then you just go run around the museum. It was really cool. And if I wasn't with my dad, I was with my mom, and my mom and her family are really well known in the folk community around here and kind of Kentucky area. So she ran a square dance shop that for many years, and that was actually on Lookout Mountain. Her family raised it was called Light and Lantern, and it was a square dance camp. So this was, think of the 50s. People across the country traveled to go to this square dance camp. And they had, but it was adult camp. I mean, but they had bunk beds and for the kids, and there was a big meal train, and I mean, everyone. So it was kind of just a big family is how my mom described it. And so just growing up around all of that, I was just constantly just flooded by culture, I guess would be maybe the best description, because it's not square dance. I wouldn't say is creative, but it can be creative, but it's a culture and it's its own little scene. So I did that. I took it for granted, I think, as any kid would, because you're in elementary school and then middle school and you want to become you just want to be normal like everyone else. And so I try to, I got into skateboarding and partying and whatever, just to try to in high school. But I also in high school got really into tech theater. That was kind of my one little way of being in the arts, but not in the visual arts or in dance like my mom. And I actually never took a fine art class in high school. Not that I can remember, but it was always like acting and theater that I was into. And I guess that was my way of kind of rebelling against my parents, because I didn't think, that was an art for some reason. That, it was just different. It seemed so different than what my parents were doing, even though it was art. And it actually took me all the way through my undergrad in Boulder, and my Bachelor of Fine Arts is in theater design. So I was like a lighting and set designer. But it took me, I would say, 2 years into there where I realized, wait, my degree will say Bachelor of Fine Arts. it is actually a legitimate art degree. So it took a while for me to embrace that part of who I am. I guess it's very normal. I speak of this a lot in my artist talks, where my definition of an artist was my dad. He woke up 5 a.m., did some drawing, then he ate breakfast, and then went to go either do murals or go teach art. He just retired from teaching, but a long-time arts educator in colleges across the metro area. But then he comes home and then goes to his studio and welds and makes sculpture or whatever. And he just does that day after day. And to me, it just seemed exhausting, but that was my definition of what an artist is. And it took me a little while until I realized, oh, you mean I'm talking to an artist. She's like, I did a painting once, this year. I'm an artist. I'm like, oh, wait, you did that one painting and you're an artist? So it changed my perspective of what it takes to be an artist and how you could define yourself as an artist. Kind of makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of felt like a ramble there, but
no.
So do you have a definition of what an artist is?
As a curator, I kind of really feel that art could be almost anything, and just creating that, taking that idea and putting it to a physical object or concept, a physical concept, if that makes sense. Because I think a conceptual work, that is what is art. But I think anyone could define who they are as an artist, because I think you have that quintessential suffering and starving artist. I personally don't like that idea at all. I think it's an insult. I'm not saying artists, or I'm not ever suffering, or I'm not starving, but I feel like art is a profession and our society has taken it for granted. I actually am pretty blunt sometimes with, say, an insurance person. I'm trying to get liability insurance for a big project, right? And they're like, oh, so what do you need liability insurance for? I'm like, oh, I'm an artist. And like, oh, so you paint? I'm like, sometimes. Oh, so you're like, you do bronze? No. And they try to put me in this category. And then they're like, well, we're just going to put you down as a metal worker. And I'm like, I don't own a welder. And they're like, oh, we'll just put you down as a woodworker. I'm like, why don't you just put me down as an artist? You have metal workers, you have woodworkers. Why don't you just put me down as artist? And so it's a little frustrating, I guess, because our society just doesn't respect that profession as much as they should. I mean, when someone says, oh, I'm an architect, you don't ask that architect to donate their time to design you a house. You pay that architect to design you a house. Artists get taken advantage of. It's like, oh, you're an artist, you want to donate your painting for my fundraiser. And you're like, well, I mean, I want to support your fundraiser, but this is my product. So it's hard. It's a hard balance.
Yeah. And I think it is. I think people have a hard time defining it. They maybe paint with a broad brush, but the minute you say art, then in nonprofits, they're like, hey, can you donate something? And, they don't think about all the time and effort you put into creating it, and then also the concept of it. Sometimes that takes years. So yeah, it's interesting. We've had that discussion multiple times with different artists. So
I believe it. I mean, I have a shirt that just says support living artists. And I really like that saying because I think that's what we need to do. And unfortunately, artists need that support from just buying that object that an artist makes. Not only financially supports them, but emotionally and creatively supports them more than I think you would ever know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to us about...
I don't think I answered any of your questions. I just kind of went off.
I think we're on it. We're just rolling, man.
We're just rolling, man.
I love it. This is what it's all about.
You know what? You did Bob Ragland proud with that, with your whole answer there. So, and I think that you're right. Artists don't get the respect that they deserve, and it should be looked at as a profession, but there's a million ways to go about being an artist. Right. And so I think that's where the waters get muddy, because you can call yourself an artist and not have any kind of formal art training. And not that you have to have formal art training, just like a photographer. It's like you can go to photo school, but that doesn't mean anything. Anybody can call themselves a photographer, but there is a difference, right, between people like your dad and somebody that creates a painting a year. For sure. And my dad and I always chat about this, about how you can say you're an artist. It's like any profession, but at some point someone's like, oh, great. Okay. I'm interested in this project, but then you have to be able to walk the walk, so you have to have the portfolio or the projects, the experience to fulfill those projects. If you told me, hey, can you paint me a pretty picture of Wes right there? I would fail miserably. Not
no reflection of the model, right?
Yeah, no. You beat me to that joke. No, because I'm not formally trained as a painter. But even a formally trained painter may not be good at the business side of the arts, which is a huge, huge part, as I've learned over the years. I've only been making art like full time for 10 years, and man, it is a long game. That's all I got to say. I don't think maybe a musician. I'm trying to think. Poet would be really hard, but it's just a long game, because as I tell artists all the time in the business of the arts, it's my metaphors are fires. You got to just have tons of fires going, and some just smolder. Some ignite into these awesome projects. Some totally go out without you realizing them. And then there's a lot of in-betweens. Like today, I had this fire going and didn't hear for a while. Sent an email and heard back like, oh yeah, the client decided to go another direction. I'm like, okay. But I've had so many of those. It was like, kind of like, okay, off to the next, cross off the list. Let's get another fire going. So, I think every artist could approach it differently, but you definitely know that's the challenge with the profession, is we're so passionate that, I think I've gotten where I've gotten because I just take opportunities. You guys called me, hey, can we have a couple of hours of your time? That's an opportunity. I don't know who's going to hear this or where it's going, but it could be heard. And that's an opportunity I'm going to take. So thank you. But you just have to take those opportunities, but you have a passion with it too. So how do you balance the passion side of the projects to the financial feasibility of the projects? That's always the delicate balance. So. You're absolutely right. You probably have, as photographers, you probably deal with that all the time. Oh yeah. I had the same exact experience today. It's funny that you kind of gave that example. I had a client that, I thought a project was going to happen, and it petered out. An email this afternoon, like, hey, these other people that own the building or the property manager already had this project shot, and they're going to share the photos with me. So we don't need them. We don't need your services. Okay. I don't get excited about anything until I'm actually there doing whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing. Or the checks in your hand. Yeah. That's the other thing. Yeah. Because sometimes that's a waiting game as well. Although the checks is always like, oh damn, now I got to do it. I got to do this,
Right.
I'm in it.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing, I loved your analogy though, equating it to fire, because I think that's right on, and it is, it's like you put all of these different ideas or different fires that kind of start blazing or they peter out. I love that metaphor. So
Thank you. Yeah, no, but it's just a long game. And I've been talking to my colleagues for a while about it where, I think of my dad, 72 years old. He's probably hearing him say that, but he's been doing this for 40 years plus. And he's just still has the tenacity and the passion to move forward with projects. But that's one thing that's different about the arts profession than a lot say an accountant. Nothing against accountants, but what are you up to? Oh, I'm 68. I'm going to retire from my accounting practice.
Yeah.
I've only heard one artist in my entire life say, I'm going to retire from being an artist. It kind of caught me off guard because it was so rare. Artists are like, oh, my dad, I'm going to retire from teaching so I could continue my full-time art practice. He always made a point to let people know he is a full-time artist and an educator, just like I am a full-time artist and a curator and director of galleries. Do they interfere time-wise with each other? Absolutely. But it's a full-time gig on both of them. It's not, I'm going to dabble. And that's where you get into back to your question, Todd, that's maybe the hobbyist right there. I'm not even saying, because a lot of my time is evenings in the studio or weekends. So I'm a weekend warrior. So you can't call a hobbyist because they only work in their studio on the weekend. I guess it's just the scale or the way, the gumption they go at projects maybe is that definition for me.
And possibly even whether they're really actually trying to make money from it or they're doing it just because they love to paint, and they're the hobbyists in the sense that they're not making it as a profession, So,
well, yeah, but then you have that's a really interesting comment, because then you have someone who is so stuck on business of public art. So there are a lot of artists out there that have figured out the game, and good for them, but that's their business and good for them. They're making art that's publicly seen. But I think sometimes that money blinds them on their concepts, or the clients. And that's like the commercial art aspect. You guys probably run in that all the time as photographer. You have your commercial art world, photography world, and then you have your fine art photography world, your own creative projects. And that's really hard, I think, especially as photographers. That's a very tough balance, I think.
I agree. I look at commercial photography. That's what pays the bills, and it's disposable. Those images have a very short lifespan. You still put the time and effort into them that you would anything else.
And there's an art and a craft behind it, but it may not be your vision. Sorry to interrupt you, Todd.
Oh yeah, exactly. You're usually working, to try to illustrate somebody else's vision.
Yeah.
And you're brought to the table as somebody that can troubleshoot and make that happen.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, then if you have artistic, you're in artistic endeavors, you're hoping that does stand the test of time, and that will be your legacy.
I would say absolutely. That $1,000 check for whatever project will be spent very quickly. That art piece that's up in someone's home or whatever, that's a legacy right there,
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong, that $1,000 is vitally important, but yeah, I think we're all on the same page. The business of the arts is a crazy business. Working in the nonprofit art world, people always ask me like, oh, so you're taking your experience and then you're going to open up your own gallery? And I was like, man, this has taught me not to open up my own gallery, because selling art commercially that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. Right. Talk about how your formal art education plays into all the different projects that you've done and the work that you do, because you seem like you bring some of that design and the scene and lighting design that you got your bachelor's, your concentration for your bachelor's. I would think that helped play into some of the things that I see on your website.
Yeah. I spoke briefly about, it took me a couple of years in college to realize I was, quote, an artist. So I was studying set and lighting design, and I loved it. It was a cool program. I was at Boulder, beautiful campus, huge, had that big college mentality. But then my BFA concentration in lighting and set design, there was 3 of us, and so it was a really small program, and it was a very sink or swim program. I mean, it was just like, oh, Collin, you're designing the set for To Kill a Mockingbird. Here's your budget. We'll work with you, and then throw you in, and you either make it or you don't. And that's helped me a lot with my projects today. Just kind of like, I don't know how to do that. Let's figure it out. If I don't know how to figure out, who would know how to do this? But I was helping my dad in the early 2000s while I was in undergrad install some art across the country. That's what I did. I went to school, helped my dad install art exhibits across the country, like the Doll Art Center in Rapid City. I mean, just kind of like, well, whatever. And I mean, I said whatever as like a teenager, like, whatever, Dad, I'll be there,
Right.
be another bag,
Yeah.
And, but we were passing through Indianapolis, and we were stopped, and he's like, let's go check out the Indianapolis Art Museum. I was like, cool, whatever. And walk in, and I checked out, and there was a couple great pieces that stood out to me, but there was this James Turrell piece. James Turrell is a really well-known, he's like the light and space artist. So of the 60s in Southern Colorado, him and Dan Flavin and Robert Irwin, a few others. And it was basically, it looked like this dark room, and then he had this painting in the very back. And I was sitting there, and then as your eyes adjust, I started noticing this painting just started going like, just getting big. And I was like, what? I was like 19. So I was getting the formal training as a lighting designer. But then I see this artist with the painting as I thought. But then as I walked closer, it was actually just a hole cut out in the wall. And there was another room. So he was just using space and light to create this perceptual effect and phenomena that it blew me away. And I was like, who is this guy? That was the first time I was introduced to James Turrell. Immediately started looking up him and his contemporaries. And that's really what kind of got me on that, whoa, I have this formal understanding and love of light, but this is exactly what I want to do. Because I love theater, but my problem with theater is it was a job, back to commercial. So I miss collaboration in many ways, but ultimately you come up with this idea, and then you go to the director, and the director is like, let's go this direction. And then it's like, and then you just do something that you're not that passionate about, unlike creating this whatever light piece. So while I was in college and undergrad learning kind of this formal training, I was taking what I was learning on the side through my dad and experiences and other artists, and developing a fine art mentality. And I remember on my portfolio reviews for my theater, my advisor and I always butted heads because I was a fine arts major in a theater program is kind of what it came about. Like he finally understood that, because I was always like, oh, this is my set I designed. This is my light plot. But here, this is what I did this summer. It was an installation at Loveland Museum. And I go into all the details and get all excited. And they're just like, who is this guy talking about these installations when he should be talking about this set design? So anyways, I got the degree. They gave me the degree, but I knew immediately that I was never going to be a set and lighting designer. Just because I had no passion. I was okay at it. I was okay. I wouldn't be a successful one, I don't think. I could do that as one-offs maybe, but so that kind of answer your question. That basically taking that moment at Indianapolis changed my perspective of my formal training in lighting design, and kind of took me down that light and space world. And if you guys aren't familiar with James Turrell, definitely check him out. He's amazing. He's still alive. He's talk about a scaled project. He's supposedly finishing up completion of, it's called the Rodin Crater. It's in Arizona. he found an old crater, and he spent his lifetime carving different tunnels and chambers and using the astronomy and cosmos of our world and the lights to create these installations. But what you spoke of, a legacy, his work will only be up for generations. That piece, that's going to be like the pyramid. Some long off alien or ancestor of us will be like, wow, what is this thing? What is it meant for? And it's a contemporary art piece built in the 2000s.
Wow.
So
let's talk a little bit about all the different things that you do as an artist. You have these incredible like geometric shapes that you do. They're installations, and you incorporate different light with them, different colored lights and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I started off, during undergrad, during that time, creating either these light installations, or I called them my light boxes. Imagine a light box where piece of wood that was cut out, and then I just had lights behind it, and you hung it on a wall. And then I learned that, instead of wood, it could be acrylic that you cut out and hang on the wall. There are two different types of artists. There are artists that let the concept guide them and let technology support them. And then there are other artists about technology and the concepts. That's not to say there's not people in between, but those are kind of, I think, and I've always felt like I let the concept guide me and try to have I'm always a little behind on the technology, even though my art seems very technological. It's actually quite, at times, old technology that maybe that seems new to me. So, that's when I discovered RGB LED lights. I'm like, whoa, this is cool, because my first light boxes were just fluorescent tubes I wrapped theatrical colored gel around to change the color, so like these steps of technology. And then I used to hand router, my designs on my board. And then I learned about CNC machines, and how these routers on machines can cut cool shapes. And then therefore to lasers and all sorts of bigger, technology, but at and Arduino controls that I got into for a while. So like I let like technology support my work, but it's never, I always want the work to speak for itself, and it's not about the technology. So I try to hide the lights or the artificial light. But speaking of commercially, so I had all these light boxes and I thought they were cool, but people are like, well, you have to plug them in. What do you mean you have to plug them in? I'm like, I don't know, it's lights. If I could figure out how not to plug in lights, I would be a billionaire, like, well, batteries. I'm like, if you want to change batteries every day, go for it, but then they're like, well, he needs a dark spot. And so I was struggling commercially on how to sell these pieces. And so this is interesting, where the first time maybe where commercially it triggered, okay, well, what can I do that says what I want to say in my art, where it's about light and space and perception, but I don't need to plug it in and I don't have to use LED lights or some sort of lights. And so that's when I started getting into mirrored work, where I cut out the shapes out of just mirror, but I was using reflections and shadows and the light itself in the room to create kind of the phenomena that I was hoping to achieve. So there are always these stepping stones. But then, yeah, you mentioned I have I love scaling my work up large, because I think something about, it's one thing if it's this big, but you see it 16 feet wide and it changes the ball game. But it's also way more difficult. And it's way more difficult to find a place to say, yeah, go do that. Go put up that 16-foot diameter circle filled with light. So, right. But once I did it, it felt really good. You always just want to go bigger, in my opinion. I would love to go bigger than I even have.
You think that's the way it works with most artists that do these large installations and work on these large scales? You kind of start at this point where you think, that's pretty big. It's, I don't know, 5 feet by 10 feet. And then you just constantly are wanting more and more, bigger and bigger projects.
For sure. And bigger and bigger budgets to get them done. But I think it's funny as a curator, someone's like, I got this big piece, and they bring in a 3 foot by 3 foot painting. You're just like, okay, well, big. It's funny how size or scale is based on that artist's perception. because you could just think of monumental scale. But my dad and I always joke, if it's not good, make it big. If it's not big, paint it red. It's a funny joke where you kind of make fun of sculptors of, like painting it. Yeah. Anyways, but I would say I like going big because it's also a challenge, and it's also it sets you apart from other artists, so there are other light artists in Denver metro area and throughout the region. Maybe someone will select me for a project because they see that big project that I've done already. And it catches your eye. You're driving, you saw a small piece, but you see a huge piece, so you'll probably stop and check it out. Make sense, Todd?
Yeah, it does. So
I'm looking at you, man. You're just like,
Well, I'm letting that stew because, like you said at the beginning of your answer, you got to convince somebody to show this stuff. So I imagine like public art. That's one thing, and that fits perfectly with large scale pieces. But if you want to show, and you have gallery representation, right?
Yeah.
Who's your
Michael Warren Contemporary? It's on Santa Fe, on Santa Fe Arts District. It's like the nicest gallery on Santa Fe.
Yeah, right on. But to show something like that, you got to have, a large space for one. And if it's not a solo show, you're going to take up a lot of the space if you're showing with other artists. So how does that work? Like, how do you convince somebody to take on some of these pieces that I see, especially these lighted pieces are amazing. Like, I'd love to have one of those in my house. I wish I had a house to house that, actually. But then after you have a show, I have multiple questions, I guess. Do people buy these large scale items? And if so, obviously they must have a large space that they can put it in. But then what happens to these pieces after a show if something isn't bought? Like, do you have a place?
The majority of the time, what do I do with my pieces?
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but I was going to.
No, I'm laughing because, take no offense, painters, but painters have it, I think, like, they're two-dimensional objects that, even if they're very large, can still slot in or get rolled up for storage. Sculptors, I joke about my dad. None of his friends hang out with him anymore because they're tired of helping him. I was born into it, so I still got to help him. I'm trying to get my brother back from Durango because I'm like, man, it is your turn. It is your turn. But now that I'm an artist, it's awesome because my dad and I help each other, like we're each other's assistants. It's awesome. Like, come over, Dad, need help unloading, So to answer your question, you need smaller work for those galleries and residential spaces. And depending on the gallery, galleries typically, they'll want that one bigger piece. When I say bigger, 8 by 8, 8 foot by 8 foot, because it'll draw attention or could be placed in a commercial lobby of a space. But primarily they're trying to sell either commercially or just small commercial or residential. And then it's the museums or art centers that want to that aren't in the game to sell, but in the game to wow. And that's where I get my opportunities for the larger work. So that big circle you see with that person standing in front of my website, that was at Colorado Springs Fine Art Center. Very cool. Brought me in, Collin, we want to show you in this space, and we actually want to show your dad and a cello in the space next to you, a father-son. We could market it well. We think both of you are great artists. What do you want to do in this space? And they saw, and I was like, what if I did one of those circles? But my largest at that point was about 8 feet. And I was like, let's make it 16 feet. I thought it'd be double as hard as the 8-footer. I was way wrong. It was like 10 times more difficult. But then I had this awesome piece. And so that's where you were mentioning my website. And that's where, as an artist, it's like, I need photos ASAP. Like, because the photos are what are going to last of this piece, that moment. So I work with a fine art photographer, Wes Magyar. There's my shout out. He's actually really great at what he does and a reasonable rate. But you get these great photos, and that is I wouldn't say the art, but that's that artifact that's left over from that piece. And then that 16-foot circle is in components in a semi-trailer underneath Colfax Viaduct in storage. I'll probably never show it again because I don't know. Part of me is like, I've already shown it. I mean, I guess the only reason I'd ever show is maybe if I was my dad's age and someone's like, hey, we want to do a retrospective of your work. Let's drag this thing out. But so I don't know why I'm even holding that on to that. Because what's interesting about it is it's just pieces of wood that are cut to a circle. I mean, it's a lot of work to make something look simple, but it's a computer program that I could do again. Like it's just some MDF that's painted, and so it's a very simple system. But I have pieces that are constantly in storage. Think of my dad. So I at least have pieces that can be taken apart or everything. My dad has these huge sculptures, and I'm going to recommend you guys interview him. You think I'm a talker? Just wait. But we bought 35 acres in southern Colorado about 20 years ago. And the main reason was just to put up sculpture. It's like, what am I going to do with all these sculpture? And so in this 35 acres, he probably has 60 plus sculptures, the majority about my size and some that are like 20 feet tall around this area. But and then he's like, well, what am I going to do with all this art? That's my inside, for interior spaces. And so we bought an old building in Walsenburg as an art storage. So and he's not the only artist. As a curator, I see this all the time where there are just these artists that are prolific, but what do you do with this work afterwards? And he's not trying to make it a burden on me, but he also wants to preserve his legacy. So it's like this kind of weird, you don't want to huck everything in the dumpster. I joke with him, any piece that's not put together, because he has all these components, I'm just going to recycle because I would not even know where to start with where the material. If it's up in our property and it's just kind of rusting or needs redone, I could fix that and show it again. But yeah, so sculptors need storage, is the whole point of that story. And sculptors need friends to help them.
Two key components.
They're always looking out for friends.
Storage and friends, and a very, 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 very patient partners.
Yeah.
You mentioned this place down in southern Colorado, and I thought that was really interesting and really cool because I was following all the different threads and back to your dad, and I saw that
you were following that.
I was following that. I was like, oh, this is cool. They have their own little family compound that's just for art, for their sculpture, and it's just a family place, or do you let other artist friends go there and do a little residency type of thing?
That's funny you mention it. Phone call today about that, actually. We consider it our art retreat. SISU is what we call it, SISU. It's a Finnish term for tenacity, grit, determination, kind of just when you spend all energy and everything's done, you continue no matter what. We've all had projects like that. Those projects and we call it that because we built an adobe cabin out there. Everything's off grid. And when I say my family, we hired a local farmer contractor guy to pour the concrete foundation because that was the one thing we just had no idea. But we raised the beams because we used. Speaking of, so my dad had a big sculpture at the Arvada Center, and that's a separate subject, and that's how I got started for this big installation. So we took all these parts of this sculpture, and that is the components to this adobe cabin. So it's a post and beam structure that then we filled in with adobe, and it's a very modest. We call it a cabin because it has the feeling of a cabin, a wood-burning stove, and a shotgun above the mantle and, stuff like that. But it's also, that's where my dad, that's his retreat where he goes and draws and gets inspiration. That's where I go to get away and get inspiration. And, but it's one big room, this cabin. And as our families grow and especially in the winter, you could camp. I mean, in the summer you could camp, in the winter, everyone's kind of in this small space. So I started building an off-grid bedroom that was about a quarter mile away. I call it a love hut. And it's basically an 80 square foot, so it could hold a double bed. It has a little wood burning stove. I carried all the materials about a quarter mile in, built this thing. It took years. Like if I added up the time and money, just like every, weekends, I think the day after our wedding, my wife and I went there and I was like laying the deck floor on. She's like, this isn't too romantic. I was like, one day it will be.
Just wait.
The sad part is I built it for 2 people and then we had a little boy and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? So like, I'm still sleeping outside after all this anyways. But we have little, with our fellow artists and composers, on my website, you'll see there's this image of these green circles, these concentric green circles. That was kind of we call it a happening. And basically that was just a project I did where I had a composer friend of mine and his friend create a music piece in front of that temporary piece that was made out of plywood that I painted with phosphorescent paint. And so as it got darker, these we're in high desert country. It just started glowing. And he's over there with his friends playing this like droney, like experimental music. And there was like a few of us artists from the big city. And then there's some of the hippies from the local town. And then maybe a couple other creatives from the area. And that's it. And we're all drinking beer and just experiencing the art. And that was just one example of kind of what that space is for. But ultimately, it's a retreat. So like our family is pretty protective of exactly where it's at, other than it exists and we'll invite you if we want you to come.
But we have to hood you so you can't tell anybody else.
Exactly. Oh, that's it. That would be a performance piece. But I was chatting with a curator today about they're working on a show about landscape and kind of asked if they could use our property for a performance like venue. And I was like, you got to run it by my dad, but we want to keep it private, but that is the intent as well, is to have those artist events. But it kind of circling back around to James Turrell, this Road and Crater project, middle of the desert in Arizona, if I've read this correctly, he intends it to be a 24-hour experience. So rather than you go to a museum, you check out the art, you leave, you get back to your world, that experience to him begins when you get in your car or the bus or however to get to Road and Crater, and you drive, really long distance through a desert, and you start to slow down. You start to slow down, just like leaving the big city of Denver. You get past Colorado Springs and all that crappy traffic, and then by the time you get to Pueblo, you're glad you don't live in Pueblo, but you just keep on driving, and then you get to Walsenburg, and you just keep, so. It starts to really slow down your mentality. And that's something I love about not only this property. I think that's one reason we all have property, is it kind of gets you away. But because my work, and I think a lot of artists' work, it sometimes takes time and persistence to get it. And so slow down. Yeah.
Yeah. And, when you're an artist, you always have something you could be working on or doing. So I think it's hard for you to like extract yourself from the work and get away from it all for a little bit, and be in a different space.
Actually, I agree, but I would say, so my siblings are probably the most similar to my dad, and they struggle maybe to get away. I'm probably more like my mom, where, it's party time. Let's have a party. And I could just like kind of, that artist in me, I wouldn't say drops out, but it kind of takes this background. And I'm a very social bee in many ways, when it like comes to, that's like my mom's side of me for sure.
So can you take a moment and since you mentioned it, that concentric piece of circle, and it's green in color, at least what I'm looking at. Yeah. Can you talk about the conceptual idea of it and then how you made it come to fruition?
Yeah. And that's actually, so that's kind of a beta piece. A lot of my projects are like beta is what I call them, like kind of those just experiments that hopefully lead to others. But talk about it. So this was just me wanting to do this project. And I love pushing material to the limit and getting the most out of material. So even though that piece is, we'll call it 8x8, and it's over 100 feet long, it's only made by 2 sheets of 4x8 plywood. You know, because it's literally just concentric circles that cut out of the same sheets of 2 plywood that I combined. And I was over there, and this was at our property, like just using whatever piping I could, just ranching it up, trying to make these circles match. And I spent the entire day. The biggest cost of the project, other than the CNC time, was that phosphorescent paint, glow in the dark paint. Stuff's I bought like the best you could buy. It was like $100 a gallon or something stupid. Wow. Yeah. Or even maybe a quart. It was so stupid. I remember just like trying to get the most of it, you know, as I was just running out. But the concept behind that, and the concept of all my work is, it's just about perception. It's changing, making you look and see. One of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite artists is, the intention of a phenomenal art is simply seeing a little more today than you did yesterday. That's by Robert Irwin, another light and space artist. And to me, what that quote means is, take a time, slow down. My job as an artist is to have you see the world a little differently than you did today, just whatever that might be. And so a lot of my work deals with light and space and the perception of it. That's not to say I don't use other avenues at times, but if I just had to kind of meat and potatoes it, that's probably it. So that piece, Todd, next to you with the mirrors, there's a concept behind the house that once stood there, the echoes and reflections. But ultimately, I love the idea that I'm creating a house that disappears. You know, that this thing that's there but not quite there because it reflects its surroundings. So, but back to that circle piece. Once I knew that concept kind of worked, I was like, this is cool. Like, I really love this. How can I, people are always struck by that image. But if you go through my website on exterior projects, I actually recreated that at the University of Denver for a project, and talk about a different surrounding and a different, you know, so I built that piece at our property for a 2-hour event. It had to last 2 hours. This DU one had to only last 3 months. It only lasted a week and a half because of vandalism. Because I just didn't have the budget to build it the way I needed to build it. But what I love about it is that I knew I couldn't use a phosphorescent paint because it has to be pretty dark to see it. So on one side, I was like, oh, what if I add like green? I was like, what reflects in light? Because it was right next to a road. And I was like, oh, road markers. And so I found that they use glass beads, and that so I like kind of put glass beads on this green surface. So as you drove by one direction, you caught the reflection of it. But then I was like, whoa, what if I put mirrors on the other side? You know, it has 2 vantage points. And it was just it's kind of, that's a piece that I would love. And I've had clients or projects wanting to do that. I've yet to do it, but that's a project where I'd love to have the budget to do it right. And it could be a really cool piece. Because I know the concept works. And what I love about it too is it could be variable. It could be, you know, instead of every circle spread out 10 feet, it could be 8 feet, or, you know, it could really fit within the space.
Right. Yeah. It's cool. I'm looking at a picture of it now, and it's really neat.
But back to photographers. So it was it was vandalized once. I went to fix it, and it was vandalized again, and the piece was missing. One was broken. And I was just like, I need to get a photo of this and call it done. Because it was already that project from hell. It just, everything that went wrong. And so I called up my photographer frantically. He showed up. I like taped one of the rings that was broken back on, but just so I could get those photos that you're looking at. And to me, it made that project worth it now. The day after it didn't, but now I look back, and then again, where are those pieces, or those broken pieces? They're in a semi-trailer underneath the Colfax Viaduct.
So I love that there's a storage unit underneath the Colfax Viaduct that has all this art in it. That's
well,
awesome.
and it started as my dad's. So I mean, and we'll talk about his influence or being around him in my curatorial world. But as an artist, this was his storage until he got the property and put his storage down south. He still has stuff, but we actually have 2 trailers. So he has one, and I basically took over the other. But he not only was he a muralist, he was a sign painter, a hand letterer for years. So he was trading for storage space basically, and he's done it ever since. So it's cool.
Right on. You know what? You got to love artists because they're such resourceful people. That's why I feel like in this time of the pandemic and everything that's going on that's weird in this world, artists are the ones that are continuing to just plug right along. Like they always figure out how to pivot and make stuff work, and always, like I said, resourceful. For sure.
I'm proud to be an artist. I love, because back to how people believe in artists are like, they immediately think you're poor or starving or suffering or whatever generalization they want to put in art. So I love changing. I love being an artist that, in my opinion, is somewhat successful and has a family and a house and, and kind of proven society wrong is what I'm trying to say. And there are a lot of artists out there that are doing it, and people need to open their eyes.
I agree, man. I think people think of artists as a, title with a little a, and really it should be capitalized, right? It is a title. It's a profession, and it's a valid profession. We're the ones that, make the world go round. We're the ones that push ideas and carry society forward.
Define cultures.
Define cultures. There you go.
I think of any history of any culture you've ever studied: the music, theater, art, dance, fashion. You do have religion and war, like wartime, but typically, predominantly, it's the culture. We define the culture. And I think that scares a lot of people. Like, they don't understand the power artists have in doing that. I think they're blinded to that. People, when I say, I live in suburbia Lakewood, you probably get this, Todd, of everyone wants their manicured yards and be the same. Just like when I was middle school, everyone, and I moved in almost a year ago, and I've been doing a lot of landscaping, and just wait. It's awesome. It's going to be something. It's going to be different. It's going to be sculptures in the yard. It's going to be not green grass. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to freak out some of our neighbors. So
that's good for them. It's good for them in suburbia to see.
I don't live in an HOA. Yeah,
I know. That's why I love living here, man. They would have kicked my ass out a long time ago. Otherwise, I love these lighted creations. Like I kind of mentioned before, they're kind of sci-fi. They kind of mess with your. I feel like I should be listening to like Pink Floyd while I'm like, looking at these. I want to see them in person. I don't know that you're going to get them out of storage in your trailer to set them up for me.
Set them up for you,
right?
The Todd Project.
One night only, ladies and gents. And then I see is that Carl Sagan that you have on the front of your shirt, your t-shirt?
Yeah.
Right on. That guy was the man.
Oh, okay. This world right now needs 2 people, in my opinion: Carl Sagan and George Carlin. Yeah, George Carlin, because I think he, as a lot of good comedians are almost more philosophers, and I think could just break down this world very quickly and very harshly, as we all need. And then Sagan, not only is he the ambassador to humans, but I think he's the ambassador to science, and we need more science in this world right now. So I think I love Sagan. I love Sagan because I just think he's that kind of steady guiding point and science, I guess. So.
Yeah. And both of them were great wordsmiths.
Yeah.
They could spin a narrative or a joke and make you think.
This looks pretty good in there. Yeah.
It does look good, man.
I've had a lot of people that are like, who the hell is that?
Really?
Yeah. I think it's pretty good for a black and white silkscreen. I think
it is. Did you make that shirt?
No, I think I found it on somewhere, I think I Googled like Sagan paraphernalia or, Sagan. I actually have a hat that says Hail Sagan, and it has like the pentagram on it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if you look carefully, you get a lot of like, what? But
right.
Oh, that's funny, man. That's great. So hilarious.
But
he was an interesting guy, and very, very much a forward-thinking person, not only in science, but as far as societal norms and that sort of thing. And
religion and his humanist values for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I again, back beneath Sagan, and I don't know why I think of George Carlin. I think I just rewatched Ted and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and I was like, oh man, I miss George Carlin.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So you've done a lot of public art projects. Is that correct? How many have you done?
I haven't. How many have I done? Are we talking like permanent? See, there's like, when I think of public art, so you can look at that DU piece that was public, but it was short term, and then there's like the Addenbrook piece, which is quote permanent, that hopefully will be up for many years to come. So I have 3 permanent, and I use permanent because there's no such thing as permanent. And these permanent projects, they always want like maintenance free, and there's also no such thing as maintenance free.
Right.
So like,
really
I don't
dumb.
know. Yeah, it's kind of like wanting to have a light box but not plug it in. You're like, I don't know what to tell you, but
it looks pretty when it's plugged in.
Yeah. Can you hide the cord? But so I have the most recent one was the City of Lakewood at Addenbrook. That was a really cool project. And then probably my one that I get the most, I would say Instagram like kind of tags, is down at the Lodo at the Dairy Block. It's right on between 18th and 17th and 18th on Wazee. Basically, it's an alleyway. Some developer, like when he created kind of that market vibe, but it's this alleyway that they wanted activated with art. It's like the first supposedly pedestrian like walkway where they closed it. So it's just not like, that smelly alley, but they had this little bridge, and I was working with the art consultant at the time that they hired, and they brought me in and said, hey, Collin, they like your work. Will you propose something? And so at that time I was like, cool, I'll just take this small proposal fee they're giving me. I'm just pumped. I didn't even really think about this project more than that. Like, I can make someone wants my idea and they're giving me a little money for it. So I was like, let's just cover the underside with mirror, and we're it'll reflect the people, and it'll be a selfie. And I just kind of went off, and I got a call on the drive home, and they're like, Collin, you got it. And I freaked out because I was like, oh my God, how am I going to put mirrors on this thing? Like, what did I get myself into? And, but luckily there is a lot of great companies out there. I worked with Demir's sculptural fabricator here in town. And so you work with them. It's like subcontracted out, basically. They project manage it. They have the facilities and the know-how and the engineers to actually hang giant sheets of mirrored polished stainless steel above people's heads to make this piece. Because of that, you don't make as much money at public art, but back to legacy, I was just like, man, I have a budget to do something that's really cool. And we had neon sign that spells here, but the R that's upside down. So when you look at the mirror, it's flipped up. Look at my website, it makes sense. But anyway, so that was a really, by far, probably my most like recognizable project. And then I have one at the side of Pikes Peak Art Center. And I don't know if that's on my website, but that's funny. That project, so my big circle was at Colorado Springs Fine Art Center. Someone from the committee saw that piece, contacted me and just said, hey, we have this building, we're interested in your work. And so long story short, they had banners on these 2 columns and it's this very brutalist looking building. But over the years, this banner whipped in the wind and it chipped away. And I think what happened was they probably went to try to get bids from masons to fix this block and realized, oh my gosh, this is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, what should we do? Let's hire an artist to cover it up. So I proposed this crazy piece, and that was my first piece. And I learned a lot. Like, I mean, that was for the budget I got. It was borderline. I don't know how we pulled it off. But it was these it's a giant light box, and it kind of really matches the brutalist feel of the building. The challenge though is like I had to cover up these blocks, these damaged blocks. So I had to not only be artist, but also kind of designer fixer guy. So anyway, so those are the 3 permanent ones I have. And what's interesting is the Lakewood one is the only one that I've gone into as like a public hall competition. The others have been either private or like through art consultants where they come to you directly. Because it's a catch-22 public art. How do you get public art projects if you have never done public art projects? So like once you have started down that road, at least have a portfolio to submit of this scale. But a lot of artists are like, oh, I could do this, but I have no experience because I've never had that opportunity. So there are some like public art opportunities where they like really encourage like first time public artists to try to, because you do have those people in the game, public art game, of just kind of constantly getting the same things because their portfolios are bigger and bigger and bigger. It kind of makes sense because it's a small world, because every airport only during the X projects only has this much for public art and so forth.
Right. Yeah. Those photos of that project in the Springs are on your website, and it's really cool what you did.
Yeah, and I kind of showed the process. It's hard, you don't want to bore people, but showing the scale, you start to really understand the scale of. I've gotten really lucky that I've had budgets to even dream in this scale, but it's really hard as a quote sculptor or whatever you want to term. I don't really consider myself a sculptor. I don't know but because you're always sculptors, you have material for public art. I was just saying, and all these engineering needs and all that, where if you're a muralist, you're like, I have paint and I could cover a huge amount of square footage for way cheaper. So it's a interesting dynamic dichotomy.
Yeah. So what's the material made of that? It looks like it's like a stainless steel or?
Yeah. So that's stainless steel. And then all of my exterior mirrored pieces, those are mirrored polished stainless steel. So just sheets that just have been polished. And as you can imagine, that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you have to fabricate and engineer it. So that's the problem with public art for me is I get really excited because it's my idea and you see it, but it's such a long road and don't have the capability, finances, equipment to build that. So it's very hands off. So my public art feels to me very architectural. And it is very architectural. I mean, having to work in a building that cover up blocks, having to put something on the underside of a bridge. I mean, but I would say actually, well, I guess I recreated a house out of mirrors. So it's all architectural, I guess. So I know a lot of artists that say public art helps support their private practice, their studio practice. And that totally makes sense to me because it's not to say you're not passionate about it. It takes so much time that by the time you get there, you're ready to move on to that next project.
Right.
I'm working on a project right now that's kind of like that. I'm very excited with Meow Wolf, that art collective that they're building the building. And but it's been such a long process that I'm ready just to cross it off the list. I'm excited to see in person. Do not get me wrong, but it's been a long time coming. So
when are we going to be able to see that?
I think they said sometime late next year. I think is what they publicly. was supposed to read on what I can or can't say in my contract, but you know what? I can't remember, so I think it's fine. Just leave that in. I think I left it vague enough. I gave the teaser that I don't think they would mind, but also I don't think I gave anything away. So
I think your NDA is safe. So before we get into the curating part of this interview, I want to talk to you just real quick about Echoes and Reflections and how that came about. There was a call from the city, right? But what was the process was it a long, arduous process? And what was the concept behind the whole Echoes and Reflections?
Yeah. I'm proud of that public piece because I think it was the smoothest, and go City of Lakewood for making it smooth. Lane, who's the public art manager, I think really made the process work really well, and my fabricator Demirj. But basically what happened was, I can't remember how I saw the call for entry, but I remember going, because Addenbrook's close to at that time I was still living in West Denver, but my in-laws live a block away from there on West Virginia, Todd. And I remember going there because the call said, we have the old homestead, the Addenbrook homestead, and all that's left there is this giant chimney, and they wanted to reactivate this chimney and like incorporate it into the piece. They wanted it to be contemporary, but also speak of history, and all those descriptors that committees love, where it's like so many people and they just spew out all this wonderful things, but it's also it's like, whoa, is it historical or contemporary? Is it, do they want traditional, or what do they want? But after looking at it, and I decided I'm going to submit, not only because I thought I had a good idea, but I was like, I'm a Lakewood artist, raised in Lakewood. My dad, this will hopefully, even if I get to the finals, that'll maybe get me to the finals, basically, if I have an all right concept. And so the concept was, let's recreate this house that once stood there. And my wife joked, when she was a teenager, she lived really close, and that's where all the teenagers just hung out and smoked and partied, and because it was this like fallen down, abandoned old home. And so I think I don't know when, but the early 2000s, somewhere, the city must have demolished the home, and they left just this huge fireplace. I mean, this pretty small. But so I asked for the old footprint of the house from the city and the Historical Society, and I tried to follow it pretty accurately. I mean, I wasn't to the T, but kind of where are the windows, where are the major doors. And so I created the footprint. So imagine a foundation being poured before all the walls. And then I had these phrases or echoes or fragments of a window, or where the door was, or where the corner of the building sat. And then what does every fireplace and living room have? The main sitting area or couch. And so that's where I was like, I want to have this big bench. But I wanted to do it all in mirror material that I was already intrigued with. I saw it work at the dairy block. And I was like, this is going to be really cool, because I think I could actually cross off. It is contemporary in the material, but it is historic, and it references the history of the building and the people that sat there. But it also references the community that live there now with the movement of them. And I give the city a lot of credit. They wanted to even make it better. So I was going to I think put in sod, like grass in between. But they really wanted to keep those panels nice, because the irrigation, they would pump from that pond. So it's like really not good water. So it'd get on the mirrored polish, and grass, just dies over time, or you just had a lot of maintenance. So they invested a little more and put some artificial turf down that was really nice. So even now, or in the winter when everything's quite dead, it's going to pop that green of life. So that's kind of how that came about. But the process, I would say overall, took about a year from concept to maybe a tad over. Typically, you have to give your fabricators at least a year's lead time, because they just have that many projects. But so then you take this idea, and I worked closely when I was a finalist with my fabricators, Demirj, and they helped me kind of say, we could afford this many doors, this many windows. How can we use this material to get the most bang for the buck? And just kind of help me project manage it and engineer it. And it's amazing engineering. That's another thing with sculpture. How much money goes underground that you don't see, like to hold up panels that aren't that tall. So that's another really big challenge is I think engineers have their place. My father-in-law is an engineer, my brother-in-law, but I think sometimes stuff is just so over-engineered and it costs so much money. And I would love to take as much money and where you could see it rather than where you bury it. So anyways, that's just a separate subject. But
it's a cool,
that kind of answer your question, Bob?
Oh yeah, man. It's a cool concept and it's a great project. And I love that it's right in my neighborhood. So
I love how the city gave me not only the freedom to do that, and in my opinion, the city of Lakewood has been a little more conservative on their art tastes until recently. But I'm glad they gave me the opportunity. And also, I mean, I think it's a very engaging piece, but it can also be challenging. Like, what am I looking at? Like, what's going on? Like, is this done? What is this thing? Like, like, where's the bronze statue that's pretty that I would look at and never think about? And that's something I want, I think a good public art does, is it makes you think. I'm not saying everyone's going to love that, but if it makes you think, maybe that's a huge goal, because, or if it makes you see differently, back to that quote, then, and I see people out there, and unfortunately, just recently, I think someone shot BBs or pellets at it on one of the panels. And I knew it was going to public art gets vandalized. It's pretty unfortunate because mirrors, even the smallest little dent looks way bigger because of the distortion. So we're going to get that fixed, but yeah, shit happens.
Congratulations on getting that project. And like I said, I think it's pretty phenomenal and that we're lucky. And it's interesting that you said that you felt like the City of Lakewood was kind of conservative because they offer so much like this. The City of Lakewood has their own heritage center and cultural center, and they offer a lot as far as art instruction to its residents.
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I think I was speaking more of their past public pieces. I just see, it's tough. I don't want to throw, because I know some of the artists there's some quality stuff. It's like any collection, I guess. There's some really good stuff, and then there's some stuff that people just made and put up. Try to be very gracious, because I know a few of the artists and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Well, let's make that transition and talk about being a curator. How long have you been director of galleries and curator of the Arvada Center? Well,
I've worked at the center since 2005, but I've been the director and curator. I've curated since 2008 was my first exhibit. And the director, I don't know, 2015, something like that. So, kind of definitely worked my way up. And so we're circling all the way back around. So we built this adobe house out of these beams that my dad had from existing sculpture. This sculpture, and he had a solo exhibit at the Arvada Center. And it was 2004. I was in college. Again, traveling the country, going to the Doll Art Center, wherever, hanging art. I was just pumped. I didn't have to stay in a Motel 6. I could stay in my Boulder house and help my dad put this up, at the Arvada Center, 20 minutes away. And I was helping him, and the then director is like, who's this gangly, goofy guy? And my dad's like, oh, that's my son. And long story short, they hired me to be an art hanger, installer, preparator. So I was doing that on the side. Then I kind of got into that art hanging world and worked at Foothills Art Center. And I was working at BMocha at the time. And then I was working in theaters as a carpenter and technician. So just kind of piecemealing all of these jobs in the creative sector. And then the exhibition designer position opened up at the Arvada Center. So I went there, and I was exhibition designer for a few years until 2008. The then director resigned. And then it was kind of the perfect storm. There was no director. our executive director, I think, was a interim executive director. The recession hit. I mean, there was just like, they weren't going to hire. So I was just this young 20-year-old kind of like, just what do I do? Like, because I had no guidance, because I had no boss. And I remember the marketing director was like, Collin, do you, what's the next show? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Why would I know that? Well, I don't have a boss. And she's like, we got to figure something out. You know, we're at the Arvada Center. I was like, oh, okay. And because of my dad and all the growing up, I saw this artist actually walking through the gallery, and really well-known painter in Fort Collins, Dave Used. And I was like, Dave, hey, it's Collin. He's like, hey. I remember going to his house as a kid, and had purple carpet, and just because that was my dad's peer, you know, I mean, and I was like, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I had a meeting at this other place for a show, but they just canceled it. And I was like, want a show here? And he's like, what? I was like, well, he's like, when? I was like, next month, you know, kind of like it's a huge gallery, you know, for like month and a half. And long story short, I mean, and he's like, can you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, but we did that show, and I learned a lot, you know, but at the same time, it was kind of like second nature, because I was like, well, I know how to install a show. I could do that. I know how to design a show. I just did, and I guess I just curated. I let him kind of really curate the show, like, because he kind of helped guide me on what he wanted to show, basically. But we had a great show, and that was kind of the first exhibit that I formally programmed. And I kind of did that for a few years until they hired they finally just said, okay, you're the curator, Collin. And I went back to school and got my master's at Regis in art administration at the same time. So kind of night gigs, side weekends, however, to get that piece of paper, because I knew if I kept on working my way up, and it would be really hard for them to say no, to not hire me. And
piece of paper in hand.
Yeah, with that piece of paper in hand, exactly. Because I was like, I had all the boxes checked except for that quote preferred masters at that time. I don't know what. And so, anyways, I don't know if you've been to the Arvada Center, Todd.
I have been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you, Wes?
I don't think so, huh?
Well, I got to get you guys down there.
Yeah.
What's cool about the Arvada Center, it's huge. And so when I say I've programmed 100 plus exhibits since I've been there, since 2008, not only these 100 plus exhibits, that's 10,000 square feet of exhibit space I've had to program. So it's a lot of work. So it's a lot of art just in and out. And unlike, say, Denver Art Museum that plans exhibits years ahead and has budgets and can close off galleries, we just kind of rotate shows. And this was pre-COVID. The world is upside down right now, but rotate shows, and just very quickly we do 12 exhibits a year in a typical year. So
wow,
it's a lot in that big scale. But what's great about it is that background through my dad. I was like, oh, Dave Used. So I'm a huge proponent as a curator at the Arvada Center. And the Arvada Center kind of set this precedent prior to me, but kind of really a home for Colorado artists, kind of that next step if you want to go to the MCA or Denver Art Museum or another, small, kind of those smaller contemporary art museums around the country. It's kind of that next step in your career art-wise. So kind of that next level of artists is kind of what I'm saying that we try to show. And but the same, and I'm really huge of Colorado regional artists. I mean, we have and back to that saying, support living artists and living artists. Not to say we don't show artists from national or internationally, or we don't show dead artists, but typically our focus is Colorado living regional artists. So, and because of my understanding, Dave Used, then there's Clark Rickert, and all of these peers that my dad worked with. So they're all his age. And so curator is another big challenge for me, or exciting. Curators want the new and the hip. And I think that's really important. But we can't forget also the founders and the mentors of the young and the hip. And so I like to try to combine them. So where if you're showing that Dave Youst in one gallery, maybe you have that younger artist that studied under him or that is working similar fashion that is younger. So that's kind of my curatorial goal, is to always, and back to what is art, and to show almost anything can be art, in my opinion, and educate our patrons to that idea that you may. And another thing I do is you push our patrons. So when I say push them, you push them conceptually, like you take 3 steps forward. This is a really challenging show. I don't get it. You bring them back. You maybe do a show a little more simple about landscape or something. Then you bring them forward again. But next, when they're stepping back, it's already 3 steps forward, before they know it, if they come to every exhibit. That's my hope.
I think that's a very interesting way to do it, because as patrons, sometimes you need to be pushed. And I've had a great education here, as I said before, and it's the same idea. The artists that we talk to are pushing me in a direction that I wouldn't just naturally go. And then you kind of come back because you're talking to somebody that is more in line of what I currently like, and then, or what past liked, and then you push them again. I think that's a great way to do, especially when you're thinking through the year or whatever.
Yeah, no, you got it. And, sometimes it's more successful, other times not, but that's kind of the strategic vision, at least, of how I engage and educate patrons. It's a very fun job. It's a very challenging job. My wife jokes, she's like, I don't know how to introduce you. Are you an artist or a curator? And I let her decide. I was like, whatever you feel like.
Yeah, just roll the die.
If you want to be a hoity-toity, this is my husband, the curator. But I think being an artist helps me as a curator, because I'm probably one of the most hands-on directors out there in galleries, because I love, like, this Friday. Well, a lot of that has to do with budget and staffing, but this Friday I'm installing sculpture outside of the Arvada Center. It's because I love it, but it's also because it needs to be done and I can do it. I just love, and I curate as a designer too. So back to set design. Okay, I know this space. I need to activate this big wall, this wall, and this wall. Once I know those pieces, I could start to fill in. So I've always curated as a designer, I would say.
How far out are you planning your exhibits?
Oh man. Well, we were doing great until COVID, and now I would say typically we're 2 to 3 years out.
Okay.
I like to be like 3 years, but I've always said, at least to my bosses, it's probably the first public, but I like to always have little gaps occasionally, because there may be that opportunity that arrives just at the right moment. And I've had those happen where we could fit in this. It's perfect. Let's do it. Boom, it's done. Ultimately, you have to make a decision at some point. Okay, we got to fill this so we can move on. But typically we're about 3 years out. But a lot of that, say 3 years, it might be like, okay, Wes, you're having a show at the Arvada Center in 3 years. I'm going to circle back around in 3 months. We're going to talk a little more in depth about what that may look like. And then 6 months later, let's really start to narrow that down, and then just go at it. So it's kind of, you start very broad and the details come down like that. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of, I focus a lot on curatorial, on materials and process, because I'm just intrigued by it. So I've done, exhibits I'm working on an exhibit that opens this January on just artists that work in wood. It's a very simple idea, but just the versatility of wood and the amazing artists that do amazing things out of wood. But then I'm linking that with an artist that's been showing here in town. She's I think like 90. Excuse me, Carly, if I misspoke, but she's up there in age, but has been a long-time sculptor that works in wood. And so you have this link between probably a lot of younger artists, but then this long-time, artist. I've done exhibits on murals where I hung all these panels blank panels on the wall, and I gave muralists a month to paint on site. And you could come and watch the artist paint. I didn't allow any spray paint, so it made artists, some of them think and work differently. But you could interact with the artists, and when they left, you saw their paints and their stations. But then once it was done, we cleaned everything up. We had a big party, and you see these huge pieces on the wall. And then at the end, I gave all the panels back to the artist and said, go put them up somewhere. You know, they're your panels, and they're meant to be exterior paint. And so I try to be supportive of artists as much as I can, supportive either emotionally or giving them the opportunity, but also financially. But that's a whole other conversation of just being able to. It's a constant issue because I'm an artist that expects payment, but then I'm an art administrator that can't always give that rate that I would like. So it's a constant challenge. But then I think if someone came to me and said, hey, Collin, you have this opportunity to show at the Arvada Center, this big thing. We could give you X amount, but I know you want this amount. I'd make it work because I'd be really excited about it. I don't want to use the word exposure there because that's a really bad connotation a lot of times with artists, but that's probably my biggest challenge as a curator is I wish I could give artists more. That's all I got. I'm looking at Todd. I think I'm blowing him away, or he's like watching the news or something. He's just like,
no, I'm processing what you're saying, and I think it's cool that you think in terms of educating people as a curator. It's not just putting beautiful paintings or photographs on or displaying beautiful sculptures, but you also link history. Like you're not forgetting like where a particular medium has come from, and the fact that you focus on regional artists is I think fantastic because I think it's easy to forget that we live in this state full of phenomenal artists that have been creating before we were even a state. We have a rich history of art and artists in Colorado.
We did a show that I haven't thought of this show since you brought that up. Discovering and Interpreting the West. It was basically a landscape exhibit, but it was 19th, 20th, and 21st century landscapes. So we have 3 galleries at the Arvada Center, and I tried to link those 3 thematically, conceptually. So it was really cool. In their main gallery, the biggest gallery, it was 21st century landscape, and it was cool. It was crazy contemporary work that gestured on landscape, but sometimes didn't, or beautiful that. And then in the upper gallery, our second largest gallery, we had 20th century landscapes. And we borrowed a lot of work from the Kirkland Museum of Fine and Decorative Art, beautiful regional landscape works, but that also hinted on surrealism, expressionism, and all the movements that happened in the 20th century. And then we had prints from a collection from the 19th century from Thomas Moran and Beardstad and all of those. It was so cool to walk through and either start at the 21st century or vice versa and just see the links and the influences. And that was a very cool show. I haven't thought of that in a long time. Thank you.
What are some of your favorite shows that you've curated over the years at the Arvada Center?
By far, this is when I knew, and if my supervisors are listening, and this is when I knew I could just do anything, like, because they give me a lot of freedom, and I think I thank them because that's why I'm still there, because it excites me to think beyond the walls sometimes. But I would say one is, okay, I have 3 gallery spaces. And that's the challenge with 3 gallery spaces. One time you may have one great idea, but then you're like, what can I do in the other 2 galleries to link that, So I always my favorite part of being a curator is going to artist studios. It's just cool. You just see who they are, get to know them. What I've realized over the years is artists have awesome studio chairs. When I say studio chairs, meaning it could be that thing they dragged out of a dumpster at their first studio, but for some reason go to studio. They brought it from grad school. They got it from their grandma, whatever. But it's also their companion at many times, their only companion in the studio. So I was like, wouldn't that be fun? So during all these studio visits, I was always talking to the artists like, And then when they looked away, I always took a photo of their studio chair. And it turned into an exhibit where I basically invited, I don't know, 30 plus artists, and I invited them to have an art piece. And then I had their studio chair on site. So you see their art piece on the wall or a sculpture. And then I made a plinth that had the studio chair with a little plaque that said, like, where did you get this chair? How do you use this chair? What is this chair? Any funny anecdotes about this chair? And it encouraged patrons to sit down, slow down, and take in not only the art, but kind of the artist and their companion, I guess. And it was so much fun because it was cool. I never heard of a show, because it's hard as a curator to think of, quote, the original show. I mean, there's been landscape shows, there's mural shows, but I was like, I don't think there's ever been a show just on artist studio chairs. There probably has been, but then I was like, well, how do I link that? So we had a partnership with IKEA. So in the upper gallery, I gave 50 artists the most quintessential IKEA Ivar chair, that wooden simple chair. And I said, do whatever you want. We're going to auction it off. We're going to give you a little money. We're going to auction it off. You can do anything except burn it. And I had one other thing because I knew artists would be like pushing the boundaries. But so we got functional chairs all the way to like wall pieces that were just used the materials wall. It was so cool. So we had that. And then in the theater gallery, working with Kirkland again, I did a formal chair exhibit where you had the Eames and the Knowles and the Frank Lloyd Wrights and all these amazing just designer modernist chairs. And it was just a fun, that was my vision of the perfect way of using that space. And I think patrons really enjoyed it. And then last thing I really is memorable was the sculpture field outside the Arvada Center. So the Arvada Center sits way back in the back of this lot. And for 35 years along Wadsworth, one of the busiest highways in the state, basically there was, I don't know, it's 15 acres of just field. And I was like, man, let's do a sculpture show. We could do this. So I reached out to a concrete company and said, hey, will you do some in-kind concrete work? They agreed somehow. I called the equipment place and said, will you donate some equipment to move? They agreed. So it started. And so, my dad as a sculptor, I started reaching out to a lot of his peers, and not only his peers, but then like the generation he taught, and then the generation even beyond my dad. So we had like 3 generations of artists, and we had 27 sculptures up, and I loved it because we had all these pads, and I had all this crew, and I was like, we're going to get this done. So if you went to work that day, you would have passed just an empty field. On your way back, you would have passed, I think we installed 18 sculptures that day.
Wow.
So it was just like overnight, like, blah. But for anyone that's listening that says, oh yeah, the sculpture field, but it's weedy and it needs paths. Yes. Everyone thinks because we've maintained this sculpture and we rotate sculptures out for the past 6 years. And the idea and the big pictures is let's make this a premier sculpture garden in the region. We could have weddings out there. We could have events. We could have happenings, art performances, etc. But that all takes money and time. So we have a committee and trying to develop a capital project to create that. Of course, COVID did not help this project in one sense, but patience, it would be my only word other than that. Yeah. And a lot of the work we feature out there is contemporary or more modernist based. And I think it could be challenging for people sometimes, but that's what we showed typically inside. So the goal was to bring our programming from the inside out, and hopefully people come from the outside in. And it has worked because people are like, oh, where's the Arvada Center? Oh, is that the place with all those sculptures? So it's really made it like this. It's become a part of the programming, and it's, to me, really important. And if and when I leave, hopefully that's my legacy. Hopefully that will continue on for years to come.
That's cool that you came up with that concept of utilizing that empty field. And I was going to ask you about that, and I'm glad you gave us the history behind, what's going on there and how it's evolving.
Yeah, and I love what I like about that field too is it's like artists. I always come to sculptors like, hey, what's that idea that everyone has always said no to? And then they propose it, and I'm like, okay, let's do it. Because it's only up a year and a half at most, or at least, and we could always extend it. But it kind of like gives that maybe that public artist. Actually, that's a good. You remember how I said, how do you get public art if you don't have public art? So I know a sculptor where he's like, I want to do this thing, but it's gonna be big because he's like, it's gonna be a ton of money and work, but I want that image for that portfolio. And I was like, do it. And he was out there rattle canning and painted it orange. I mean, it's a very DIY grassroots type of, and that's what I love about sculptors is they all help each other out in many ways. And they're just doers. So, yeah. I felt like I interrupted you a lot, Todd.
No, you're good, man.
So
I mean,
sorry.
you have a lot of art history. You come from this phenomenal, artistic family. And, like I said, I think we need to have you on again sometime. We can delve into some of these other things that we haven't had time this evening to discuss. Before we leave off this evening, I know you've done some co-curating, and you curated Art of the State, I think, with Dean Sobel. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I saw that Dean was on. That's awesome. By the way, Dean is the coolest guy. In my opinion, the Clifford Still Museum could be the most exclusive, pretentious museum in the city because it's freaking Clifford Still. Because of Dean, he's made it inclusive, welcoming. He's offered his time to jury not only at the Arvada Center, but at co-ops around town, and he comes to our shows. Dean is awesome, and I congratulate him on his new endeavor at the University of Denver full-time. It's, I think, a loss for the museum, but I know he left it in good hands, and so it'll move on. So, yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I feel like I interrupt, but I love Dean. Dean is awesome.
He seems really like a really cool guy, and I enjoyed spending time with him and learning about Clifford Still and the museum, and his history of being a curator. I was kind of curious about how it was co-curating with him, because I think what you described as far as Dean's concerned, I think he's a really interesting person. I wondered just how that experience was and if you learned a lot hanging out with him.
Yeah, so Art of the State, it's hard when I say, even though I'm a juror, I really try to take a step back in that show. So more director and maybe just, I know the space so well that a lot of times I just know what will work in the space and just what hasn't due to experience. So I'm working with someone like Dean, and I'm trying to remember the other juror. Was it just Dean, or was there another juror? Anyways, typically try to have two guest jurors and myself, but I usually let the guest jurors kind of hammer it out and choose the show. And I just kind of am the tiebreaker, or if I just feel really strongly one way or another. But Art of the State it started in 2016 kind of as what's going on, the heartbeat of what's going on in the city. And what I love about that show is it's really become like people like, when's the next Art of the State? And you get those older artists that submit, but you get a lot of the new and the hip that I'm unfamiliar with. And the openings are, so, the Arvada Center, we have not only galleries, but we have performing arts and education, but you get a lot of people coming to performing arts. I love it when performing arts have trouble parking because like the opening has like 700 people. I just think it's so cool. It's like our free galleries brought 700 people to the opening celebrating, the state of the art. And it's a lot of fun. And the next state of the art is coming up in January of 22, by the way. As of today, asterisk, COVID can change everything. That's what I've been telling everyone as a curator. It's been really hard with COVID because of you do so much work, and I haven't canceled anyone's exhibit, but I've had to postpone many people's exhibit just because it causes a chain reaction.
Yeah. Right. Makes sense.
So,
as a curator, and this is my last question, as a curator, do you have any advice to artists?
Yeah, keep creating. I leave that in my email subject a lot. Just keep creating. So when I'm just Collin, I look at that image It's not a good image. I'm not saying it's bad art. It just could be the photo. And I'm saying if someone just submits randomly, could be the photo. It could just have a bad day. It's just that day at that time, at that point in time that I choose to make that decision. But keep creating, keep getting your work out there. There are a lot of other Collins out there that make decisions that have probably way better taste than I have, and will hopefully select your work, and hopefully you'll have that body of work because you've been keep creating to create a wonderful show and keep growing as an artist. So just do it. It's funny. I actually just do it. I think about that saying all the time. Whoever came up with that, I was like, man, that is good, because it is so true. Just do it. Just like, don't make an excuse. Just do it.
Yeah.
We need like I need to hire a graphic designer, like some sort of take of a Nike swoosh that says just make it. Just make it.
Yeah. There you go, man. I like that. You could market that pretty well, I think. When we interviewed Ed Dwight, he signed his autobiography to both Wes and I, and inside he said, "Do something," which I thought was awesome.
Well, what I love about artists, I mentioned taking that idea and just doing it, making it into a physical object, a physical idea. And I think that's really something a lot of artists don't do. Anyway, speaking of, during this COVID time, I was like, I'm working from home, don't have a lot of my studio projects on hold. And so I fell in love with landscape design, and I love it. I love it. Like, I mean, I get the same buzz from making art as I do from digging a hole. I don't enjoy digging that hole, but I know that outcome, just creating something and making, is really important. And by the end of the day or into the project, you see, I did this cool paver project. I was so proud of it.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Just make it. Do something.
Yeah.
Right on, man. Collin, thank you so much. If people want to see your work, you have a website. What is that website?
CollinParson.com. It's Collin with 2 L's and Parson.com. So Neelock Nosrat backwards.
Okay. And then
I had to leave with a joke. I don't know.
That's awesome.
And you're on social media as well? Are you a social media guy?
Instagram at Collin Parson. I really appreciate you guys having me on. If you ever feel the need, definitely call me up again.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have you on again, man, because we didn't get to half the things I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, wow. I would love to have you guys up at the Arvada Center, and maybe even have my dad on at some point, because I think you would get this interesting, he's a storyteller, and I think you'd start to put the pieces together. Maybe that'd be like, oh my God, this guy's insane.
Yeah. It'd be fun to do an interview right from there, right from the heart of it, and talk to your dad or some other art, or maybe an artist that's showing at that time, so yeah, keep us in mind. We'd love to do an episode at the Arvada Center. Sounds
great.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Thank you so much. This is great. You have just amazing art, and you're doing an incredible job at the Arvada Center. So congratulations on that. And thanks for your time tonight.
Well, thank you. And visit the Arvada Center, and our galleries are always free and open to the public. And just right now during COVID, it's just a free time ticketed system, but you could make a reservation very easily. And so encourage your viewers to do so. And thank you.
I'll make sure that that Arvada Center information is in the episode notes this week too, in addition to your social media and your website. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. I could pretend like I clocked in right now.
You can bill for these hours.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. On that note, for the Tenet Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.